Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Tonight, we are going to try something a little bit different. I've received a lot of requests from various sources of people wanting me to cover Avalonia. I will admit, I'm fairly new to this. I come from a very strong WPF background. I love my WPF very dearly. I've poked at Avalonia in years past, but it's been many, many years since I've looked at it. And frankly, the new stuff looks pretty compelling and it seemed interesting. So we're going to dive in, but more specifically, we're going to dive in on this with a couple objectives. So one with a goal for learning MVVM. So if this is your first time, you're looking to start a new app, you're wondering if Avalonia is right for you, we're going to kind of focus a little more on the MVVM side of things and how that may play in with Avalonia. And I will also say, I'm somewhat new to Avalonia as well. I've been playing with it for a little bit. I feel like I've got a lot of it came fairly naturally because of my WPF background. But if you see mistakes, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments. We'll go from there. The second is this is going to be kind of a learning opportunity. I'd kind of hope to get to the point where I could come away with something that would ultimately end up being a .NET new template. So for people who haven't seen it, I'll drop a link in a moment. I've got a bunch of .NET new templates that I very much like for my opinionated way of starting applications. They come with loaded with my opinions of what I think is right because I think the built-in templates aren't opinionated enough. And I find that people want to have a show me the right way, or at least a right way. There's plenty of good options out there, but oftentimes people just want to be pointed in this is the right direction. And people get weird about, oh, we don't want to take sides and pick a winning library. Nah, I'm just going to pick one, and we're going to pick one of the good ways. There's obviously more than one ways to skin a cat, which is a horrible expression, by the way. Don't skin cats. And we will go from there. So real quick, let me I will drop a link to my .NET templates repo, and then we're gonna dive right on in. So, Avalonia, what is it? So this is a cross-platform XAML-based UI framework. So people coming from things like .NET MAUI, WPF, WinUI, UWP, etc., the layout and the structure is going to feel very, very familiar to you. If you've got a strong grasp of C#, you're going to be even better off. Avalonia can target a lot of platforms, including web, mobile, Linux, Windows desktop, Mac. Like there's a lot here. So I am going to blaze through a couple of the getting started things because I think people are more than capable of reading on your own. One quick thing I'm going to call out. If you are an indie developer, great, have fun, knock yourself out. If you are an enterprise customer, because I know that's where some people have the sticking points, they do have enterprise level support. Oftentimes, people's reasons for not picking things like Avalonia are that's a third party. I don't trust the third party, yada, yada, yada. They don't have good support, blah, blah, blah. This is the page to go to if that's you. So if you are a larger ticket item, you're worried about, having support, bug fixes, direct access, whatever you need, there's the pricing sheet. If you're the indie developer who's just looking for a framework to get going, great, knock yourself out, have fun. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna play the role of indie developer for tonight, and see where we can go from here. The other thing I'm gonna point out, because I have my material design and XAML project, some lovely person, ported it to Avalonia as well. People kept asking me to do it, and I kept dragging my feet, going, "Nah, I don't know. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work." Someone else has taken it up, and I applaud them. Even as recently as 2 days ago, pushing out an update. It looked like it was a small bug fix thing, but still, active repository. Even though some of this stuff is, months old, 2 days ago, kicked a release. Gotta respect it. Gotta respect it. So there is all of that. You'll note the getting started and stuff looks really similar. You'll note a lot of this stuff kind of resembles another one. So for where all of this is coming from, and you'll note that a lot of the stuff in here ends up being really similar to the material design and XAML project. Obviously, heavily reskinned, heavily changed to make it all line up and work. but it's going to feel a little familiar. So we're going to take a look at that. Okay, one last thing I'm going to show. They've got this Avalonia showcase area, and I just got to show off a couple things because there's some absolute gold in here. Like, you can go through and click this one. So one, remember I said this can run in a browser, right? Text, controls, editable. Obviously you don't have, fancy IDE support, and you have to know how to type numbers. And then when it crashes, we're going to try this again. That was not a good demo. That's on me. That's on me, not on Avalonia. Close your eyes, rewind, pretend like that didn't happen. So assuming you can type the number 40 correctly, right? Live updates in the browser. That's pretty cool, right? You can show like your acrylic, your material opacity. Like, there's some absolute gold here. So if anybody wants to play along, right? Absolute gold in there. But these are kind of showing off controls and whatnot, and which is good. Like, we may come back and poach some of these because these are kind of clever and nice. Save XAML as, open XAML. Oh, cool. You can just load it straight up, huh? That's cool. That is scarily awesome. Oh, because you have the code behind for the XAML file as well. Sweet. But let's say you want to play games. Here's Solitaire, right? Like, again, all of these are on their showcase page, so feel free to go around and do. But like, this is all just straight running in the browser, and you can go and kind of pull the code, and people can yell at my horrible Solitaire. And let's see, there's a couple minor things like on the quick jerks of my mouse, but for the most part, it's like, this just kind of works. That's kind of slick, right? Sorry, my little fan is blowing stuff around. So, really awesome demos. It demos well. Let's go through and play with it. Okay? So, getting started, blah, 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 blah. There are two things you need to do to get going. One, install the built-in templates. I do not know who would be doing something new and targeting earlier than net 6. That just does not compute to me. So .NET new, install the templates. Great. There are extensions available that you definitely want to go through and install. So Visual Studio, or if you're playing on Riderland, either one of those. I'm a Visual Studio person. Let's see. Is there a reason you don't include global.json files in your template? No, I probably should. PR is accepted. Trying to think if there was a good reason that I didn't. I remember thinking about doing it. There might even be an issue logged on my repo for adding it. I just didn't do it. Yeah. PR accepted for it. So happy to take something in. But no, there's not a good reason. In general, you want a global.json. For people who aren't familiar with it, it controls the version of the SDK. And so it prevents people from accidentally running into issues because your code expects SDK, say, version 8, and they only have version 7 installed. You get a much more useful error message because all the popular IDEs play nice with it. Okay, so next up, once you've done this, .NET new list Avalonia, you can see there are a whole bunch of templates that get installed. There are a few things worth calling out. There's kind of an empty app. There is an MVVM app. This is a project level thing. And then there's the whole kit and caboodle, the Avalonia cross-platform app. This has all the stuff. So we are going to start there. Let's see. .NET new, boom. And away we go. Yeah, it does centralize the versioning a bit more of it. You still have the issue of needing to specify the TFM, but like, they don't get out of sync. It does get mildly awkward when you're doing multi-targeting because oftentimes you have to install multiple, but whatever. Okay, so let's look at what we got. Okay, so new Avalonia, and even though I named this MVVM app, just to be clear, I did use the Avalonia cross-plat template. If you do the new project wizard in Visual Studio, you'll get a similar experience all the way through. But let's fire this guy up. Okay, so here's what gets really awesome, right? You can see right out of the gate, Android, browser, desktop, iOS. Right? Just straight up. And it's going to squawk at me because I don't necessarily have workloads loaded up for all of these. So I may, in the interest of simplicity, I guess we could leave them open. As long as I don't try to start them, we won't run into too many issues. So for people who did like Xamarin back in the day, some of this stuff will look real familiar to you. Specifically like the Xamarin Forms days, where you had different head projects for each of your target platforms, and then a shared app project. That's more or less the structure that you have here. They were very kind enough to go through and do a directory build props file with some kind of pre-canned defaults. Hallelujah. This is one of those things that I think gets skipped in a lot of people's templates, is like, why not do this? This is good. Like, happiness is directory build props files. For our purposes, we're going to go ahead and play on desktop, and we're just going to launch it, right? So .NET New F5. Admittedly, I did run the install stuff ahead of time, so if you don't have all the stuff installed, install all the things, right? And out the gate, huzzah. Again, I feel like my template, I'm going to try to push it a little bit more. Let's just kind of briefly look at what we've got here. So we've got a program CS. It does a startup. You can see there's this app builder. So they very much follow the same builder pattern that everyone likes. You'll note they do have this use reactive UI. Now, I am going to intentionally skip reactive UI. I will give it a quick shout out, and then we will move on right past it. Because it is not my UI framework of choice, but some people really like it, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is a very good project. I just find that it is, until you get something complex enough to where you know why you need this, I find that it is much more difficult for people to grok. So, my opinion. Guten Morgen versus Gates. This is like bootstrap of sorts for MVVM. It is an MVVM library that follows a slightly different pattern than a lot of other MVVM libraries. It very much follows the React kind of fluenty syntax. You can see here of one of their nice things that they like to show off of, hey, let me show you that as somebody's typing in a search query, I'm going to wait 0.8 seconds for the query. I'm going to trim off white space. I'm going to wait for it to be distinct so that if the user, space, backspace, and, it hasn't changed, we're not going to actually get all the way down. We're going to make sure the query isn't just pure white space. And then on the UI thread, we're going to go ahead and execute our search command, right? You can do all of that in this very fluenty syntax. That's great. That's wonderful. Again, I find that people have trouble kind of grokking this type of stuff. But if you prefer it, great. Like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with reactive UI. It is one of the, I will say, reasonable choices when picking your own MVVM framework to build on. Right? The one that we are going to play with, and Avalonia fully supports it, Microsoft Community Toolkit MVVM. This is the one that I very much favor. Right, so this is where we're going to dive in. I've got a video on using it with WPF when the 8.0 release dropped. I've got an update video for the 8.1, and I briefly covered the 8.2 stuff. The 8.0 was the big release with all the cool stuff. So that's where we're going to focus. But short version, we got a builder, and then here's where all the meat and potatoes lives. All right, so we come in here and we have our our kind of core application. Again, this for me, this harkens back to when I did Xamarin Forms development. This feels very similar, right? All of your common app code goes here. You've got some heads to target your various platforms, but the vast majority of the time, these projects don't matter to you. You're spending your time here. This is where all the interesting stuff goes through and happens, right? We've got a main window, and here's the first thing that shows up immediately. You have a designer, right? I've mentioned to people before, I have mixed opinions on designers because by definition, they show what your app might look like at runtime, not what it will look like at runtime, because it doesn't know what runtime is going to be, right? That is, now, some people are perfectly fine with that. They're like, I just want a preview, I want to see it, and I think they actually call it a preview in their docs. I don't think they call it a designer, because it is just showing you a preview. Great, fine. Again, mixed opinions in my mind. I don't necessarily like them that much, but to each his own. Some people very much enjoy it. We can see here they have, rather than kind of the more obtuse WPF syntax, this design data context, you can see their comment is very convenient. This only sets the data context for the previewer in the IDE, right? To set the actual data context, set the data context property, look in code, look at app. That's a typo in their thing. app.a.xaml. Oh, no, it is. That isn't a typo. I completely missed this. Is this Maui? No, this is Avalonia. So this is, this guy here. It is for people who are interested in learning this stuff. Everything I'm going to show tonight, there's going to be a little bit that's specific to Avalonia, but a lot of this is going to be kind of universal across the board. So you can see it's going through and just explicitly setting the data context. For people coming to this from, see where is their docs? They have a very specific, where is it? Documentation. They have a specific page for getting started coming from WPF. So if you are like me and coming from a WPF background where that's what you're used to, this set of docs is invaluable, right? A lot of it is just nice stuff. And some of it, frankly, makes me want to go and re-implement it in WPF land, right? Like they have a grid. Rather than doing the large obtuse way of specifying grid column and row definitions like we do in WPF, they can just do them straight in line. Great. Like that's yeah, I can look at that and go, that is better. I agree. Again, this comes from Avalonia being a modern framework and WPF being the best technology that a decade ago had to offer, right? Like that's kind of the pros and cons here of what we're getting. So there are a handful of minor things that are worth calling out. I think the styling, the grid, and the data templates are the key ones to go through and look at. There's just a handful of things. This line here, I nearly died laughing, right? WPF's hierarchical data template is called tree data template in Avalonia, as the former is difficult to type. In my case, I'm glad they didn't call me out on this because Kevin can't spell, right? That, like, trying to spell hierarchical is not trivial. I type in H-I-E and hope that the autocomplete finishes it for me. Because if it doesn't, I got about a 50-50 shot of hitting that. Tree data template, I'm feeling a little more confident in. I nearly died laughing when I saw that. I'm like, yep, that is exactly what it is like in WPF land. Okay, main window, data context, that's getting stuff through. We can see that the main window has a single view here. So in XAML, you have elements and attributes, right? So element is kind of your top level thing. If you're familiar with XML, attributes are all these things set on here. With XAML, there are some things that you can set in attributes, some things that you can set as elements, and oftentimes there's an overlap between the two. So usually you can interchange between the two syntaxes if you want. So for example, rather than doing title as an attribute, you could do window.title title, you know, new title, right? You could either one of these for assignment. The problem is this is nice, short and concise, and this is big and ugly. So when possible, I usually tell people avoid element syntax, favor attribute syntax as much as possible. It will make your life much easier. You will be happier. Trust me. So just for what it's worth in there, that is the general recommendation. The other thing to be aware of when we start talking about MVVM is it's all about the context, regardless of what thing you're in. In Avalonia and WPF, it's called the data context property. In Maui, it's called binding context. It's the same thing, right? When we start looking at these bindings here, what this is doing is this is connecting a property in our UI, in this case, the text property of a text block, to something, right? Emphasis on something. And so whenever you're looking at a binding, the important thing to know is what is my data context? What is the context under which this binding is going to be evaluated? And by default, it's going to be your data context property. And more importantly, data context is inherited. Because you'll note here what we saw is the data context is being set on main window, but it's not used until we get into main view, right? So main window has a child element called main view. Main view itself is what actually has the text block with the binding going in, that's going to be looking at the greeting property. So if we look at main view model, we can see there is a property called greeting. Great. Right, and they're suppressing the warning that tells you to make members static because bindings, especially against view models, don't do statics, right? If you're going to do a binding, you're going to get an instance property, not a field, not a field. That'll be important, right? So this guy's here. So let's go through and play with this guy a little bit. So sorry about the massive formatting. For people who want this, I'm just going to show this off real quick. XAML styler. Boom. Love this extension. View in browser. I absolutely love this thing. My WPF templates include a default styling for XAML styler. So if you have the extension installed, you'll get formatting similar to mine. There's little things like 2-space indents, all that fun jazz. Because XAML is big and 4-space indents is huge. I may have to update it for XAML. Okay, anyway, so let's do this. So we're going to start with this stack panel. Stack panel works like you would expect. It stacks things, right? Not shocking. Okay, and our preview is going to kind of help out. All right, so we can see we've got a stack panel. If we set our background on this guy, because fuchsia, because for those who have not heard this before, I use fuchsia as a visual to do, because in my opinion, it is ugly enough that no one's going to leave it and accidentally ship to production. I usually, whenever I have the privilege of working with a designer on a project, I usually tell them that, and they usually laugh. Sometimes they look at me funny, like, and I suspect that they may have, done a design that used fuchsia and disagree with my opinion of it, but whatever. Okay, so stack panel is filling the whole area. Text block is inside of it. Things are stacking vertically. That makes sense. What we might do is we might just actually take the vertical alignment of the stack panel, bring it down into the middle so that it kind of looks nice. And then underneath this guy here. So, vertical alignment of the text block was meaningful when the parent of the text block was the user control, because the user control contained the whole area. We vertically aligned with inside of our parent. Now that we're inside of a stack panel and we can see the stack panel is only as big as it needs to be to fit its contents, vertically aligning does absolutely nothing, right? So underneath here, let's go ahead and put in a button because we need something, content, change me, right? And here's where we get to our first bit of, see, the button is now left aligned. This is interesting. Horizontal alignment, stretch. That's interesting. So the default, I'm learning things here too as well. The default in Avalonia is apparently left, not not stretch like it is in WPF. Okay, great. I can respect that. Properties window doesn't work. Disappointing. Disappointing. Not that big of a deal, but still disappointing. My little things, right? And we probably, if we were going to do this, horizontal content alignment center, right? So we make the button span the whole window, and then we center the content with inside of the button. So you'll find that this is common in a lot of what I would call content controls, where the content control itself has a horizontal vertical position, but then its content can have a position inside of that. Okay, now how do we go through and do this? Now, ye simple way of doing this would be, and let me see if I can find my way into my happiness. Again, I'm coming from a WPF background, so if I default to doing things the WPF way, that's just because of how I do it. So inside of XAML, if you give something an X name, that does multiple things. One of which is it creates a backing field for this guy. And well, let me look at it. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's so love it. So inside of our view, you'll note it generates this thing as partial. So there's what we call the code behind file, the .cs, which is generally nested. So if you don't see the .cs file, expand. We have our code behind, and then we have the C# file that comes from our XAML file. Right? So here I was just using F12 on initialize component because that's an easy way to get in here to do it. But you can see here we've got my button. This bool is a little different than what exists in WPF. That's kind of cool. It gives you a way to dodge the XAML loader. Huh. Interesting. Interesting. But then you'll note it goes and looks up the control given that name and then assigns it into the field. You now have access to it. Huzzah. Okay. So if you want to do things the very manual way, you can go ahead and wire up a click event handler and go through and do it. And this works, right? This is something that I usually show people in WPF and say, this is actually okay, right? There's some MVVM purists that start throwing things right about now. It's okay. It's okay. You can use the code behind. Now, the point of MVVM is to separate your UI from your logic, right? So there's UI stuff, and then there's business logic-y stuff that needs to happen, right? When you click buttons in your app, stuff should happen, data should update. The entire point of MVVM is that separation of concerns, and it's only made possible because of frameworks that have good binding engines, right? MVVM falls apart. Like some people try to shove it into frameworks because they like it. And if the framework doesn't have a reasonable binding engine to do that link between view model and view, you end up with like an MVU, MVC type weirdness stuff, and it just doesn't play nice. So the issue with just doing straight click event handlers is now you start tying up logic inside of this click handler, right? You're now going to put code here. And then the next problem becomes, well, now when you want to test this, you have to try to invoke a click handler. Well, a click handler is going to have this sender and this routed event args, and it starts to spiral up. And so the stuff that represents your business logic and the stuff that represents your UI start to get muddied together. Now, that's not to say you can't use code behind and then be diligent about separating your logic. Some people do a great job of this. And if that's you, great. But it does mean that you're going to do everything, I will say, manually. Right? You want to change a property, you go and change the property. It will do exactly that. And there are a lot of people successful at this. A lot of people. I've seen specifically WinForms applications. There's a lot of people that do this and they can organize it and do it very well. And it works great. There's a reason WinForms is as popular as it is. Because it does this and it does it really well. And as long as you write your code well, you're off to the races. Okay, but what we would much prefer instead is to say, hang on. I would much rather use my view model, right? View model is my happy place. My view model is just a plain C# class. It is nothing more than that. And I am going to just axe the view model base because I don't even want that, right? We're going to go plain Jane C# class. And what we would like to do is we are going to change greeting up to be a get set. Right, we're going to do that maneuver, and we're going to get rid of these warnings since that's no longer a thing, since it now understands I want to do it. And then we're going to do something like private void, I don't know, set greeting string name, something like that, give or take a little bit, right? And then we're going to do greeting gets welcome, right? Except for you have to remember to do your C# interpolation correctly. To Avalonia, right? Something like this. Don't copy this code too much. This is for reference. So, simple thing. When we click our button, we're going to want to set the greeting. We're going to pass in a name so that it can greet me and say, you know, welcome Kevin, etc. Right? That is where we are going. So the first step then is, okay, how do I do a thing, right? Inside of an MVVM framework, what is it that I do? And the default setting for this is to leverage an I command. So public I command, set greeting command, right? And a command represents an action the user can take in your UI. Typically, people associate commands with buttons, but you can kind of wire them up in other ways as you want. But a button is usually the simplest example because a button is simple, right? The user, you know, clicks it or hits enter or whatever they're going to do, right? The button is pressed, that invokes the command. The thing is, an I command comes with more than just do the thing. It actually also has the ability to say, can I do the thing? So execute the command, and it also knows, can the command be executed? This is important because quite often, a very common thing, imagine a login form where you don't want the login button to light up until the users at least type something and say the username and password fields. Right? That's a thing that is important. You want that login command to only return true from its can execute after username and password both have some content, right? Maybe a min length or whatever you want to do. So a command wraps all of that functionality up into a nice little package that you can use. And this is where MVVM libraries start to go crazy and get to have lots of fun. You'll note iCommand is from the system Windows input namespace. So this is something that isn't necessarily Avalonia specific. This guy shows up in a lot of places. And the implementations of this, that's where people, you know, pull the gloves off and we start having brawls about who has the best MVVM framework. Because implementations of this guy is where the opinions start to come into play. But we're going to do this guy here, and we, for our purposes, we're going to write our own. I don't recommend you do this. However, I think this is important to understand how the whole thing works. Public class my command, right? We're gonna do this somewhat quickly, just so that we can have a quick demonstration, and then we're gonna throw this code away. Let's see. So we're gonna do our can execute is going to be stupid simple. Return true. That's about as simple as I can possibly make it. We're gonna make this thing be action do stuff. And we are going to, yeah, sure, we can use a primary constructor. Why not? And then down here, we're just going to blindly call do stuff. I think that's as simple of a command implementation as I can come up with. Okay, and so then in our view model here, we are going to go set greeting command. Copilot, I am mildly impressed You have no concept that world. No. You were doing so well, Copilot. So good. I'm not that fat. Okay. So we are going to create a command. The command will have an action. It'll do the stuff. We're going to go breakpointy, 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 launch. Just so we can have a concept of where we're going. Wait. Turns out that if you don't use the command anywhere in your XAML, it's going to have 0 effect. So on our button, we're going to go command, binding, set greeting command. Right, something like that. Huzzah, go. Okay, so constructor gets called. Great. If we look at our call stack, we can see that we came through just as the previous comment indicated that, hey, we are in a classic desktop style application. So we're doing this. Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Avalonia. We're going to create our command and we're going to just let it go. Okay, so we can see we've got this. I don't know if people can tell. Kind of hard to tell. The button actually has a slightly different background color, especially when the mouse is over it. It's just the fuchsia makes it hard to see. It's kind of flashing there a little bit. Okay, so when I click this button, you'll note our execute method gets invoked. We didn't pass any parameters, which is something I hadn't talked about with the command yet. So we're going to ignore that. It's null. Great. We're going to invoke do stuff. Do stuff jumps us straight up to our Lambda here. It invokes set greeting. We can see our greeting is now, oh, dang it, I missed it. And zoom in enough to make it. Welcome, Kevin, to Avalonia. Great. F5. And we can see that nothing changed in our UI. Right? We got a command working. We got an initial value loaded into our UI, but our UI is not updating. And this is where we get back to that idea of why a binding engine is so important to MVVM. So the important thing for MVVM, or potentially one of the most important interfaces for it, is I notify property changed. Once again, you'll note that the source of this guy is coming from system component model. This is not an Avalonia thing. This is an MVVM thing that works in all the major platforms that do it, right? So we're going to implement interface. This interface could not be simpler. It has a single event, property changed. And not shocking, this event needs to be raised anytime a property changes. If we look at the event handler, it's a very simple event handler. And on this event args has one member, property name, I guess one property, two members, whatever. Property name, that's it, right? Again, system component model, not Avalonia specific. So when this property changes, this event needs to fire so that any binding that is watching this property knows to update itself, right? So the simplest implementation here, property changed. Oh man, the Copilot is just on point, right? So we null check our event just in the event that nobody's registered up, but it probably will never be null as long as there's a binding. Shouldn't be null if there's a binding. We invoke it. We pass this as the sender, which usually doesn't make too big of a difference. And then the key part here is the property changed event args passing along the name of the property that we care about. Okay, this breakpoint we no longer care about. F5. We come over here. Change me. We no longer care about this breakpoint. Okay, we're only going to focus on this, right? So our greeting has changed. Great. We F5. And now the UI updates, right? This is the sum total when people talk MVVM. These are the minimum things to know about. Property changes and commands. Okay, let's talk a little bit deeper because this is not how you should actually implement it. Okay, so the proper way that people will show you to implement this. Let's see, convert to full property, please. Thanks. Don't like that. I need to figure out which, something changed in my Visual Studio and the default color theme went to green. And I'm convinced whoever set the default does not use dark theme. Okay, so the fully implemented one, and again, I'm just going to show this quickly so that we can move on to the cool stuff. But it's important to understand what's happening behind the scenes. To properly implement a bindable property in your view model, the general steps are compare the current value to the new value. Because if the values are equal, right? If I were to do this, we would hope that there would only be one property changed event raised. Because setting in duplicate values, you're not changing anything, right? And when you raise the property changed event, it can occasionally be expensive because what you are doing when you raise this event is saying, hey, all the bindings that are watching this property, go check and see if you got something to do. There's work out there. Something's different. So raising this property blindly is overhead that you shouldn't do unless you actually need it. So we check if the value is different. If the value is different, we assign the new value, and then we would raise property changed, right? And you will see people write all kinds of helper methods around this pattern here. Like there are so many out there. They will often go through and say, okay, set property if changed. They'll usually take in several parameters. There is support for like caller member name that's built into the compiler now that I am convinced was entirely added just so because people were doing this pattern so bloody much, right? So you will see all kinds of stuff for going through and doing this. This is the proper way to implement that because once you have this pattern implemented, you no longer need this, right? The rest of your code, because once you implement the property properly, the rest of your code is now fat, dumb, and happy. And you just can focus on writing the relevant methods on your view model to do the stuff you care about, right? Commands invoked. It's going to set my greeting. Everyone's happy. You know what? While we're in here, let's get all fancy. Let's get all fancy like parameter. See, spelling's hard, right? So we're gonna get real fancy. We're gonna change this guy to action of string. Right, just to demonstrate the parameter here real quick. Let's see, and we're gonna do parameter to string. All right, so we're just gonna do that. I don't know. Stop yelling. I know it's unhappy because toString is declared as potentially returning nullable. Blah 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 blah. Yuck. Whatever. Okay. And then in our UI, what we can do is we can say, hey, my command parameter is going to be Kevin. All right, let's fire this up and just prove that it works. And then we're going to go grab the community toolkit. And I will show you how to make all of this code disappear. Boom, set greeting. We can see the parameter actually made it all the way in. We can see that this code now just sets the property, but because the setter of the property does the comparison, raises the property change, the binding works, everyone's happy. Awesome. That's where we're going. Okay, community toolkit time. Okay, so let's grab here, browse, MVVM toolkit. This guy here. So, like I said, 8.0 was the big release. They've had a handful of releases since then. 8.1 added some cool stuff. 8.2 added a little bit more, but it was one of those, once they kind of got it down, like the 8.1 and 8.2 releases were kind of just smoothing over the stuff that they didn't quite either have figured out or ready to go for 8.0, and it's now just golden. But there's a couple things to call out here from the docs that are worth showing, right? So the key things in this library, there's an observable object, a base class for objects implementing iNotify property changed, right? This is your view model, guy here, right? Observable recipient, this is for people who want to do messenger stuff. This is for validation. And then again, this is where one of the opinions comes in, an implementation of iCommand, right? And then here's where it gets even more fun, async relay command, because We have async and await in C#. We love this. The weak reference and strong reference messengers are just a in-memory pub sub implementation. And then their IOC helper configuration stuff. Again, opinion based on that. Not overly concerning at the moment. For people who may have looked at MVVM Lite, this is the spiritual successor to MVVM Lite. Right? MVVM Lite, the maintainer didn't have time to do it. He kind of gave some input and blessing, and the wonderful people who do the community toolkit took that and went crazy with it. And it is lovely. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, and one of the best things about the MVVM toolkit, is it comes with source generators. So if you are not familiar with source generators, it's a way for C# compilers, or the C# compiler, to automatically add code. Emphasis on add, not modify. Add code right before the compile occurs. Now, because of that, because it can't modify your existing code, we have to give it a place where it can add code. So the way you do that is in C# is we declare our class as partial. So the partial keyword just says, hey, this view model class is going to span multiple files, right? And normally we don't do this with regular classes, but once source generators were added, partial became real popular real fast. Because now we're saying there's going to be the part of the class that I write and the part of the class that the source generator writes for me. And I want that. That's a thing that I want. And then we're going to go through here and we're going to go observable object. Grab the appropriate using statement here. And you'll note, once I grab observable object, if we take kind of just a small glance at it, you'll note it implements iNotify property changed. You'll note it also has property changing. So changed past tense occurs after the value has been changed. Changing occurs before. So if you care to do something there, and again, all kinds of helper methods. There's the magical attribute for the compiler support for caller member name and all this stuff. So if you want to do that kind of thing where you have all of those checks, again, here's the set property. That's the same implementation that we did before, right? Check for equality. If it's equals, bail early. Raise property changing. Assign the backend field. Raise property changed. There's a bool in case you need to care about it. Most of the time, we don't care about this. Right? And the reason we don't care about this is because this whole property that we have here is somewhat of a simplistic implementation. We just looked at their underlying method that does all of the stuff, but we can get really fancy. We can go observable property, and then we can delete this entire thing. Done. This is where the mic drop would occur. I need like sound effects. That's what I need. I need a mic drop sound effect. So this observable property, and I will show this to you in the source generators. So on projects where you've brought in source generators, we don't need the property changed event anymore either. If you look underneath analyzers, under your dependencies, you'll see that different NuGet packages bring in different source generators. So we can see Community Toolkit MVVM source generators is now showing up. And we can see there's a whole bunch of stuff down here of what it's doing. But the one we're most interested in is the one labeled Observable Property Generator. Right? Conveniently, they've named it nicely. And if we expand this out, we can see something that looks like our main view.g.cs. And if we double click on it, we can see a representation of the partial that it generated. So again, that whole idea of our class is now split across multiple files. Here's the other file for it, or one of the other files for it. And we can see it generated a property named greeting. There's a getter that looks real similar to what we did before. That one's not that shocking. And then we can see an implementation of the set where it does the equality check. If they are not equal, we're going to do these changing methods, raise property changing, assign the value, all this stuff. These methods here, I will just call out, are partial methods down below. Partial methods in C# give you an injection point. Because when you just decorate this field, you're like, well, hang on. When that changes, I kind of want to do something. And I kind of want to do something, you know, fun, right? Like maybe I have private int count. And you know what? Every time greeting changes, I want to increment my count. So all you do here, partial, and we can go through and say, okay, what do I care about? You'll note there's two methods. One has the old new value. One just has the new value. Do you want to do it before? Do you want to do it after? I don't know. We'll just do this one. And we don't actually care about the new value because all we're going to do is count plus plus. All right? Because we're just going to count how often the greeting changed. But by leveraging the source generators in the MVVM toolkit, the amount of time you spend building out the boilerplate goes to very little, next to nothing. You got to set a base class, you got to add the partial keyword, and you got to set the attribute. Great. Okay? That gets us the bindable properties. And more importantly, very nice bindable properties with plenty of partial methods that we can then leverage to go through and do it. Let's now deal with this I command, because we saw that the library came with a nice relay command implementation. Now, if we wanted to, we could do new relay command and all this stuff, and we can take a look and see, oh, okay, their relay command, I mean, it's obviously slightly more advanced than what we built out, but, you know, it takes in a delegate, it sets it up for the execution, great, yada, yada. That's fine. Well, we can do better. We can do better. Because all of this here is kind of boilerplate, right? So let's just not do any of it, right? Because that's a little too much typing for me. If we go and set a relay command attribute, now bear in mind, these are two separate classes because secretly, since C# 2, I think, ye old version, when you are declaring attributes, even though these things actually have attribute on the class name, because it's inside of the square braces, we know it is an attribute, and so the attribute suffix is inferred. So you can we just type this. And now we have our relay command back. And you'll note, I somewhat cheated a little bit, right? I'm going to just undo back. I very intentionally named my command property method name with the command suffix. And the reason I picked that naming scheme is because I secretly knew that that is exactly what the source generator is going to build out for me. Let's take a look. So if we come back over here to our source generators, let's see, relay command generator is the bottom one. Once again, we can come in and take a look. And it looks, frankly, ugly because source generators have to handle all possible cases. But the key things here, we can see it did generate a property for us. The property is actually iRelay command of T. And we can take a look at that guy because iRelay command of T implements iRelay command, which ultimately gets down to I command. So eventually we get down to the I command that we care about. But there's some nice helper methods that it provides along the way for us if we want. And we can see it's got this backing field that it's built up for us. And it's gone through and said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to do the, what's it? No, it's the null coalescent assignment. I don't remember the name of this operator. The double-haired Elvis operator. And go ahead and create a new relay command pointed to our method. So if we fire this guy up, right? So our view mod, and we're just going to burn this guy to the ground too, because we don't need him anymore. Boom, boom, boom. And what monitor is it on? Okay, here we are. If we go change me, and we turn off our breakpoints, I really should just do this without the breakpoint so we can see it. Huzzah! Ooh. Okay, this is why I very much like the MVVM toolkit. Okay, let's actually build ourselves out a little login dialog. I think. Let's actually stretch our legs a little bit more with Avalonia and see where we can get with this. Null coalescing assignment operator. Thank you, Benjamin. See, I have trouble with this kind of stuff. Okay, so we're gonna change some of this stuff up. So we're going to go ahead and do, ooh, actually, I'm curious. Does their stack panel have like a spacing? Oh, it does. Mwah, mwah. Love that. Love that. This is the spacing property is one that I wished exist in WPF, because quite often you stack a bunch of items and you'd like to put some space between them. Right? Like I am mildly tempted to backport some of these controls into WPF so I can have them, because they aren't hard. They are not hard. It's just obnoxious. Okay. Let's see. And we're going to do a text box. I love how easy this is. So we're going to go text, binding. Let's do username. Oh, text box. Is it not text? What is the, yeah, text. What is your problem here? Oh, you just can't resolve username because it doesn't exist yet. Fine, hang on. We'll go make you happy real quick. So, leveraging what we now know, observable property, private string username, and we are going to make you nullable, and then we're going to go with observable. Really, Copilot? If you're going to write the code for me, at least put the new line in. I'm gonna start to get picky, Copilot, if you're going to show off. And then we'll do relay command, private, and we're going to show this whole thing off. Async task, do login, right? And we're going to, inside of here, just to show it off, we're going to do a task delay of time span from seconds, long enough to where we can see something happen. We might put a little spinner or something in there. Does it not turn on implicit usings? That's disappointing. Implicit usings enabled. Boom. There. I don't want to think too hard. I am way too lazy for that. What? Oh, is it just enable? I just have trouble remembering these. One of you should be. There we go. There we go. Okay. Enabled, not enabled. Okay, so we're going to do that, and then we're going to do something like greeting gets login success, right? So you'll note, now that I've got my view model set up like this, I can now focus on what is the actual logic that I care about doing, right? And more importantly, I can write a unit test over this if we want to. Very useful thing. Okay, so let's go through and take a run at this guy. You should now be happier. I don't understand why username doesn't exist. It does. Okay, I'm going to just assume that the designer has lost its mind with source generators and doesn't know what it's talking about. So let's go ahead and do text block. Text gets username, and then rinse repeat this. Password, and is there a password box or is there a way to customize your implicit using boilerplates yourself that you use rather than just project type? Not beyond. So this implicit using is from the framework, so you don't get any control over what this is. There's nothing stopping you from doing, and this is actually one of my personal favorites, item group, creating up your own usings, using include, right? Like, for example, if I say, you know what, I don't want to be typing this kind of stuff so much, please just include that for me, right? The problem with doing it here, though, is that's going to include these usings on all my projects, and I probably only want them down here. We're going to do that. Yeah. XAML styler has, it struggles with CS proj files. We can do that. We can take this guy and we can go here. And now it'll generate global usings for me behind the scenes. So I prefer to do them in my CS proj or props files or targets files, because if you do them with C# files, you are limited to what is known inside of the project. Whereas if you do it at the MS build level, you can leverage more knowledge around your projects externally. So being able to magically import all of your usings, like for example, some people like organizing the repos into like an SRC and a test project, and so all their test projects go under test, all their main projects go in SRC. And so you could do a directory build props file at the test level that just magically includes a bunch of stuff for your test projects and get that stuff organized. So you can start to leverage those additional features. Whereas if you do it just in C#, you're left with things like file linking to make it happen. If you want to write your own source generator, maybe that feels like overkill for something that's kind of already built in. Okay, I do not understand. And does this thing have like a password character or anything on it? Oh, it does. Look at that. Look at that. So proud of you, Avalonia. So proud of you. And then we're going to go down here. We're going to go button, content, login, command. Let's see. Binding, login command. Boom, done. And that should... We're going to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Don't need you. 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 I closed the thing I cared about. Bummer. Okay. Oh, it's do login. So we're going to change this to just be login. That way that matches. Okay. I don't understand that squiggly. Okay. So now we got something that looks a little more like this. So not bad. You know, so we'll say Kevin. Great. And then super secret. And then we'll click the login button. Actually, let's put a breakpoint in here just so we can see it happen. Login. And we can see when we look at this, there's our super secret password and our super secret username. And then our greeting updates to login success. I was very confused for a minute because I'm like, why didn't it change right away? Because I had put a task delay in. If you put in a task delay, things don't happen right away. They are delayed, right? And then we can do change me, log in. And you'll note there's something really cool that's happening here. So on this relay command, we declared an async task. And you'll note when I click the login button is disabled, right? So by default, the generated commands will disable themselves while the execution is going, because most of the time you don't want concurrent execution, right? The user's, rapidly monkey clicking the login button, you probably don't want multiple executions of your command. So the first one disables it, and then it's allowed to flow through, right? If you want to turn that off on this relay command, there are several options down here, right? So the first of which being allow concurrent executions, right? So we can go allow concurrent executions, true. And now we are free, just out of curiosity. Yeah, I was like, I don't think Avalonia has the hot reload. Not for something, I was like, if it can handle hot reloading source generated files, I was going to be seriously impressed. I'm like, all hail. No. Okay. So we do, Kevin, password. I don't know why I'm typing. There's no validation yet. But now you'll note I can just keep clicking. And then bing, 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 bing. Right? So if we come in here and go, I don't know, count. Actually, let's do this. Let's just make this guy observable too while we're at it. Observable property. Or I guess we don't need it observable if we don't bind to it. But what we can do here is we can come in here and we can go count ++. This is not easily thread safe, so I'm intentionally doing this before the await. Let's just get rid of this for the moment so it doesn't get in the way. login success, and we're going to come in here and we're going to do, show the count, right? Just so that there's something there. So now if I go login, right? Rapid click, use all that stuff, and we can see the login count starts to go up. Pause, a little more, and you can see it update. And I will say this, I don't know if it's coming through very well on the stream. The performance of Avalonia is really good, like really, really good, impressively good. So yeah, tops off to you, Avalonia. Okay, so there is that. Then the next thing we want to look at is disabling this, because a common use case here is saying, you know what, I don't want login to fire until the user's actually typed in a username and password, right? So we'll just delete it, right? If you need to allow concurrent executions, turn it on. So can execute is the other key one in here. And so what you do is you create yourself a member that is going to return a Boolean. Now, this looks like source generator. Oh my word. It's like who writes their Copilot? You are just a show off tonight. Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to write, but dear heaven, you're showing off. So, this can execute here, name of, can login. This is arbitrary, right? The important thing here is it has to be Boolean returning, because at the end of the day, this is to power that can execute member of iCommand to make sure that those actually lay out properly. So now what we have is this, but what we're going to do here is we're going to fire this up because this should fail. All right, so our login button is disabled. I type in a username, I type in a password, and nothing happens, right? Because the commands can execute was checked once, right? And we'll just prove this one more time. I should have done this at the beginning. Breakpoint. We'll fire this guy up. So right as we initially start, username and password are still null because nothing's assigned to them. Our app launches, and you'll note nothing checks can execute ever again. Like that's it. Or it can execute, can log in from the can execute of the command. Right? So the important thing that we need to do now is say, hey, when this changes, let the command know that we need it to be different. So for example, we can go back to that partial, right? Username changed. And we can do something like login command, notify can execute changed, right? And we can say, hey, when the username is changed, let the command know it should reevaluate itself, right? Don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do it in even less code here in a second. Right, so we do that. So we come in here, and you'll note I type password, nothing. But as soon as I type username, breakpoint. And because I mashed on it, because now username is changing, and so now we get on username changed. Great, that's exactly what we want. And now because it's populated, right, I get rid of this, it's still populated, not quite what we want. But if I type here again, it now properly is going to disable because it knows there's no password. But it's only evaluating it when username changes. It's like, oh man, now I got to do it on password too? Imagine if I've got like 40 of these things. That's annoying. Well, once again, source generators for the rescue. So there are a number of additional attributes you can put on these observable properties to tell the source generator, hey, by the way, when you're generating out those properties for me, I want you to also notify other commands that might be waiting to know about when this property changed, right? So notify can execute changed for. So you'll note in the docs, it's showing that what it will do is inside of the generated code, it's checking to see the set property is the one that has the Boolean return if the value changes. If the value changes, it's then going to call that same notify can execute changed on the command. So rather than having to write all of this stuff, like a like a developer who likes to do things manually, we can be much lazier, much lazier, right? And we can go login command here, and we're just going to whack that and bring this up here. And now we should have our login page having our, and I'm going to get rid of this breakpoint because I don't want to get it. It's going to get pinged a lot. So login disabled, ding, 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 and it works. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Add some password. Nothing. Add any username, and we're good. And now, magically like that, we've implemented our can execute change for the command. This is important, right, of being able to do this. And this handles the common case. You still will run into situations in your applications where you need to actually call the notify can execute changed, right? There's always going to be cases in your application because something occurred. You need to let the command know that it should reevaluate its can execute, because this doesn't mean, even though it says can execute changed, oftentimes you're going to call this if you think can execute could have been changed, because what this tells the engine to do is to say, hey, command, you should reevaluate if your can execute state has changed, right? It might have, it might not have, but oftentimes trying to write logic to determine whether you should call this or not is more expensive than just blindly calling it. So in a situation where it might be true, right? Like in the generated code for each of these, it is by far cheaper to say, hey, every time username changes or every time password changes, let's just reevaluate, right? And off to the races. So it is perfectly fine to manually invoke it if you need to. The other nice thing is we are once again now in a situation where we can straight up test this, right? The generated commands that this thing puts together, right? Login command, if you were to do this from a unit test, you can just straight call execute async and await on it, right in your unit test. And now you have an easy way of testing all of the logic inside of this method, and you're off to the races. Okay, kind of loving this. Let's do one more thing, because part of me wants to see the material design stuff work because it looks so slick. So let's see here. Where are we? We are here. We are here. We are here. Okay, so step one, grab NuGet package. Boom, boom, boom. Manage NuGet packages. Paste NuGet package. Install. Apply. Great. That makes me warm and fuzzy. Okay, now we're going to jump back here because there's a handful of things to do. Very similar to how my material design library has bundled in themes, they have done something very similar here, where at the top level, it can go through and fire. Is it possible to have a delay on notify can execute? Good question. Good question. From the MVVM toolkit library, there is not a delay. However, I suspect that the binding itself, at least, so in WPF, you can literally just do delay equals insert number of milliseconds. And WPF handles the debouncing of when to push it through. So in WPF land, you can just straight do delay there. I don't know that type resolver Avalonia does not appear to have an equivalent. So if you do need to debounce it, you might have to do it yourself. +1 for WPF. Now, I will say that is one of WPF's biggest assets and weaknesses, is it did come with a lot of features in the box, which is why it is still around, because it's stable, lots of features, and works. But its biggest criticism is its performance. And a lot of its performance problems come because of a lot of the, like, it has to support all its whole feature set. And so you'll note, like with UWP and WinUI, the feature set that is in there got pared down in favor of performance. And it appears Avalonia has done something similar. So there's a handful of things where you might end up needing to do stuff yourself. Okay. Oh, one other thing I wanted to call out. This is something that I saw that kind of surprised me a little bit. Is this top level data templates, right? And the docs here. It's important to understand that data templates in Avalonia are not the same as data templates in WPF. They serve a similar purpose, right? They still are the thing that maps some sort of view model type class to some UI, right? At that kind of conceptual level, they work the same. But there's a little bit different stuff where there's this, rather than a template selector, there's an iData template, and this mapping through here. The thing with this, so data template selector and iData template, they serve the same purpose, but their APIs are a little different, right? So you'll note here, this thing is registering up this view locator at a very top level. And you'll note, this is just doing straight reflection. It's probably fine. I don't know if I would leave this as the way I would structure my app. Like you probably plug in a DI container or something or similar, right? Because this is coming through and saying, okay, if the thing derives from my view model base, which our thing is never going to match that anymore, go through, replace the word view model in the type name with the word view, and then see if I can find that type anywhere. And if I can, I'm going to assume it has a default constructor and instantiate it. Otherwise, I'm going to slap in a text block with not found, which admittedly, this is better than what WPF does, right? When WPF can't find a data template for a given type, you just get, well, you get data.getType.fullName, right? If this were in the text block, that's the WPF behavior. And so is that useful? Not really. It's also kind of confusing for new people who go, why don't I see the pretty picture? Why do I just see the type name? That's stupid, right? This is a little friendlier. It gives you something to work with, something to know about. I suspect I would want to plug in a DI type situation here, and I don't know how I feel about this matching. Like, I've done this before in a lot of my apps. It makes me twitch. But again, this is where we get a lot of opinionated ways of how do I link these things together. This is where a lot of those MVVM libraries, or maybe not necessarily MVVM libraries, I'm thinking something like a Prism, right? Where it is kind of responsible for how am I going to map these things together? And what is that convention? Like this one's clearly a very simplistic convention. For a small app, it's probably great. For something bigger, I don't know if I'd go with it. Okay, sorry, distractions. Key thing here, in our application style, we want to do material design theme. I very much approve the fact that they kept my API almost identical. That makes me really happy. That means somebody didn't hate it. Okay, so we got that. You'll note themes here, and I don't, did they call it in their docs? They did. You do need to make sure you get the XML namespace for this guy. Inside of XAML, this is how it actually resolves types, right? C#, we have a using statement. In XAML, we have to do XML NS. And unlike C# where we just list out all our usings and tell the compiler to figure out when we say type name, in XAML, you have to be explicit and say namespace : type name. And only things in the default namespace, the one without the colon, can be specified without a colon prefix. That's the sum total of how that works. Okay, so there's that guy. Is there anything else we needed to do? We are not in version 2.15 or lower. Great. Installing additional packages. All styles are included if you want to use data grid. Oh, did they separate these things into oh wow. Did they? Ooh, I don't know how I feel about that. Ooh, boy. I get it. There's probably a desire to have let's see. Installed packages. This guy. Do you have Oh, no. Interesting. They have uh hang on. There. Do they really have Oh, is it just oh, it's just data grid and dialogue that they separated out. Okay. That's interesting. Oh, I see. It's probably because there are because these ones take additional dependencies. I got you. I got you. Okay. Okay. Let's fire it up. Be material design themed and look pretty for me. I mean it definitely changed. It definitely looks different. Yep. So we're gonna come back over here. I don't know if they have hot reload. Let's find out. Let's see. Do you guys do hot reload as I muck with stuff? So for something like this, how about vertical content alignment bottom? Nope, you do not auto gen there. We're gonna dial this spacing down to maybe 0. And then we're gonna do the same thing here. I mean, it's nice they theme this out, and we're gonna get rid of the fuchsia because frankly, it's making me sick. Okay. Bad fuchsia. Okay. Little bit nicer. Still kind of big. Still kind of big. And vertical content alignment didn't appear to change. I really want this text kind of closer to the underline because it seems like that thing is really big. How about background? Well, fine, we'll do fuchsia again. I'm really curious to take a look at. Yeah, because it is big. It is big all the way across. I'm wondering if it's just got high padding or margin. Padding 0. Let's turn that off. Do you have margin around you? 0. I'm willing to bet one of these things is probably bigger than it needs to be in a default style. So we can probably find it because I'm guessing it's going to be organized similar to how I would have done it. Let's see. Controls, themes. Oh, that's the theming stuff. They kept a lot of the same stuff in there. Where's the actual styles being built up? If it's not there, additional. I would have expected controls. There's the underline, but I don't see where the text box or similar is getting picked up. Interesting. Interesting. The content control is set up nicely. That layer's there. That layer's there. Huh. Well, I won't spend too much time trying to diagnose the library, but suffice it to say, the thing still works. And we do get somewhat of a material design theme built in, which still works great. Okay, next thing I'm kind of curious to try because it looked slick, right? I think I have the workload. Oh, I don't, do I? WASM tools. Okay. .NET workload install WASM tools, and I can just about guarantee that I gotta shut down Visual Studio for a workload install. You should spell workload with 1K, not 2. Yes. The machine has a pending reboot. Well, unfortunately, rebooting my machine midstream is kind of a bad idea. So we're just gonna see what happens. Because it'd be kind of I want to see how close we can get between desktop and web. Like, is it really like the demos look slick? Well, let's see. Let's see. Keep going. Keep going. Install all the things. I probably should have looked at how big this was before I kicked it off. But at least for the a good chunk of this, the last thing I was hoping to kind of take a look at is the pub sub stuff. Oh, I've never fully understood workloads. High level overview. Yeah, so a workload inside of the .NET SDK or Visual Studio in general is basically a high level grouping of tools. As you can see here, it's pulling down a whole bunch of individual installers and packages. So in this case, WASM tools. So oftentimes there will be like, there's a Maui workload, there's a desktop workload. And what comes along with that is the SDK specific for that. Right? So it's a way of kind of grouping together all of the needed, let's just do this, all of the needed tools rather than it just being a single one. So, because you could, in theory, go through and download all the individual ones yourself, but yuck, who would want to do that? Okay, so do your thing, and then restore all the things, and then hopefully, yeah, when you install VS and you click some of those checkboxes in the installer, it does some of that under the hood. Yeah, so if you look at the Visual Studio installer, I can just show this real quick. When you go in here, the workload, and that's actually even the name of the tab at the top, is kind of these high level groups, right? Of I want Maui. But if you come across to individual components, you can start to see like Maui's going to be made up of like the SDK for Android, the SDK setup, the OpenJDK. You're going to end up picking up the Maui SDK on top of it. So a workload just kind of combines together all of the stuff that you probably want. If you are doing Maui development, you probably want all of that stuff. Maybe you don't, right? Like sometimes you'll check the Maui box and you go, you know what? Android's not a thing. I don't care about Android. I'm going to go through and get rid of those because you know what? I don't want that extra overhead of having to, have the JDK download and whatnot. Or, same with desktop development. Maybe you go and you say, nah, I don't want all the things. I only want some of them. In general, you probably want all the things. But you don't necessarily have to have it. And that's the thing is with a workload installed, it usually means all the checkboxes behind it are there, but nothing stops you from coming into these individual components and removing the things out that you don't want to have. And then the CLI thing that I did, that was just the CLI way of going through because I didn't want to think too hard about grabbing the right workload because it gave me the name of the workload right in the command. I'm like, you know what? We'll just do it on the CLI. It's quicker rather than opening up the Visual Studio installer and trying to find it and clicking the button and blah, 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 blah. Like they told me the name. Might as well just kick it off. Okay, so we're going to try browser. And I'm going to be tickled to death if this just works. Because that would be seriously impressive. Seriously impressive. Okay, show me WASM. Well, a browser window just popped. Waiting to see thingy occur. See. Do something useful. Be really cool to see it just work. Is there an error in here by any chance? Is it pulling everything down? I don't know what is expected here. Blank screen is not expected. Very confident in that. Try this one more time. Make sure it wasn't something weird. One or more failed to launch the debug adapter. Well, I feel like I'm getting the full browser experience now. I usually enjoy poking fun at web developers versus desktop developers. Google Puppeteer. Oh, so they're using Puppeteer behind the scenes. Interesting, interesting, interesting. I bet you that's the way they're getting the debugger hooked up. Let's try it without debugging just to see if that makes a difference. Oh, look at that. Without debugging, we're off to the right. Holy crap. Whoa. That's pretty slick. Now, I'm a little bothered that I clicked login and it hasn't finished in the 3 seconds, which kind of makes me suspect that there is a potential bug there. I am wondering if they've got a... So there's... Configure await false. I wonder... Let's go desktop real quick. I have a theory. Because a common problem that you see happen is people needing to get back to the UI thread. Because whenever you're working in desktop land, being on the UI thread is a big deal. Because only the UI thread can modify the UI elements. That's kind of one of the ideas of a single threaded apartment, right? The interesting part is that worked just fine. So I'm curious what is different about why. Oh, if you just relaunch, it's going to relaunch desktop. It doesn't know to switch back. All right, let's go back to browser. I'm just curious to see, is there something going on? If I flip back off the project, can the debugger? Because I'd love to see the debug experience. Oh. Okay, so something's gone awry. Now, I can't eliminate the fact that I'm on Visual Studio Preview builds, and so it's not uncommon for me to run into kind of weird tooling problems at times. I do like how they slap that in there. Try that. Let's try that. Let's give it one more shot. Let's see. If this is WASM, I should, in theory, have WASM-y things. Avalonia JS, native WASM, okay. That is there. It's not making it through, but now I'm curious. So let's try something that normally doesn't work in WPF land. Before await, after await, build. I'm gonna close you down all the way. Because I will say the fact that I literally did nothing with the browser thing aside from install the needed tooling and it just launched, that's pretty slick. We'll give them that. Props to you, Avalonia team. I don't know what issue Puppeteer is running into with this, and I'm kind of wondering if something's running in the background and holding on to something. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Does this thing appropriately show console output? Because that'll make me tickled to death. Show me console. Okay. Credit where credit's due. I know. Console write line doesn't seem impressive, but there's a certain amount of respect for knowing what goes into that and seeing it just work like that. I am curious why the task delay doesn't work, and it would not shock me to find that this is documented somewhere. Deep dives. Do they have something on threading or similar? Templated controls, themes. In your program CS. Got it. So there could be something there. Got it. So there are a handful of things. So reactive, they plug into the default exception handler. Work running asynchronously, there could be an unobserved exception. I'd be curious what exception would be unobserved. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, is there built-in controls? Oh wow, they've got a lot of stuff in here. That like they've got so much. Items repeater, gestures, pinch, pull, scroll. Yeah, that is slick. Okay, so I don't entirely know what's going on with the website of the fence, but for the most part, that works. That works rather well. Okay, I wanted to talk briefly on pub sub stuff. So let's. How do we do? Uh, do a second window here. Trying to decide what the easiest way is to go about doing this. Or actually, we'll just do separate view models, I guess. So let us imagine that once we log in, we would like to notify some other area of the application that we have successfully logged in. So for example, right here we have this main view, which encompasses all of this. But let's imagine that up here, rather than main view, we actually, in fact, have a. We're gonna abuse this grid because I kind of want to play with it. Let's see. We're gonna do row definitions, and we're gonna do star for the main one, and then auto for the second one. No, no, no. I would like the grid to encompass this, please. All right. So what we have done is we have a grid with 2 rows. The first row is set to 1 star. So with star sizing, it's all percentages. So in this case, because this one is the only star column, it means 100%. If there was a second column that was 2 star, this would be the top 1/3, the bottom 2/3, etc. Right? So it's how many stars is how many pieces of the pie you get. And then the bottom row is going to be auto, meaning it's going to be as small as possible to encompass what it needs to. And so we are going to do a text block here, and then we are going to set it into the second row. You'll note that I don't necessarily set grid row here. We certainly could, but the grid row, grid column, these things are ints. The default value of int is 0, so we can just omit it if we want. Some people like to specify it on all for brevity. To each his own. All right, so we're gonna do this, and we're gonna go here, here, here. We're gonna do something like status view model. Yeah, that'll work. And then file scope the namespace, public the class. Putting an L on the end of view models is really stupid. Let's see. Observable object. And though you don't need to make it partial, you will the moment we want to do a source generator, which we do. Let's see. Observable property. Private string status. Wow. Okay, thank you. That's all we need. Okay. So what we are going to do here. So main window view model has its data context being set at the very top back here. And its data context is being set and passed all the way down. What we are going to do here is we are going to override the data context at a particular level. And I'm just going to go X name. status control, right? This could be a whole user control or whatnot. For the moment, we're just going to do something simple. Status control, data context gets new status view model, right? So straight up hard coding. So normally data context will be inherited down unless something overrides it at a particular point. So inside a main window, data context will be set at the window level, and then that'll propagate down into main view, but then we're going to hijack the data context at this level and apply it somewhere different. And then that means that this guy here can do text binding status, right? And that goes like that. And then we can do that should just work. And I'm going to actually change this to be ready. And let's, oh, wait, that's browser. Let's go back to desktop. Set as startup project and launch. Same error. Cannot parse compiled binding without an explicit data type directive. Let's see here. What did I do wrong? You don't know your data type because I set it in the backing thing. VM. Where else was VM used? Am I just missing where this is set? Not missing it. I don't see where that's used. I mean, I'm happy it's there. Why? I'm confused. Why is status view model not showing up here? MVVM app view models. I think that's probably just a delay. Their designer may struggle with the same thing that the WPF designer struggles with. It's difficult for the designer gets in a catch-22 situation where the IntelliSense doesn't show you the non-compiled stuff. Man, this thing launches so quick. I will say, from my perspective, this thing is on the mark. Okay, so we can see down here we now have a little status bar control that's just going to always sit on top of our window. Should it be specified on the window element? Not in this case, because I'm only overriding the data context at this bottom group level. I've made this a text block right now. Functionally, when I've done this on other apps, this ends up being like a user control with like a toolbar and various things along it, because it's kind of common in your window to break apart your UI into logical segments, because having one view model for the main view usually means that view model starts to get real fat real quick, right? So it's oftentimes convenient to start to break it apart into logical segments depending on what it is. In this case, we're going to have main view and status at the bottom. Great question. Okay, but what we would like to do is we would like the status to update when we've logged in successfully. And right now, what we have is a problem in that main window view model and status view model know nothing about each other. There's no link to them whatsoever, right? This is a very common problem where you find that two things, sometimes they're related, sometimes they aren't. Like sometimes this happens when you have a list of view models as well, and you want the individual items in that list to notify the parent about, hey, you know, something's happened. I've been changed, or hey, I would like to be deleted out of your list, or something to that effect. Right? This is where the pub sub thing starts to come into play. And so let's see. I think we can look at observable recipient. I think is the magical guy here. So observable recipient is a derived class of observable object. And in this case, you will note all he's really adding on to the puzzle is this concept of an iMessenger. And inside of the community toolkit, iMessenger has two implementations: weak reference messenger and strong reference messenger. And the idea here, generally, if you aren't sure which one to use, go with the weak reference messenger. It's probably what you want. It's a little more rare to need the strong reference messenger, but some people do use it. The idea here is because C# is a garbage collected language, objects get cleaned up when there's no longer anyone referencing them, right? You're all done, you get to go away. The problem is your messenger is kind of this singleton global object, right? We're going to leverage this static property here. Oftentimes this would be registered as a singleton in your DI container or similar. But the idea here is if you have this singleton that's responsible for sending and receiving messages, and it knows about every instance, and it maintains a strong reference to that, it means nothing in your app ever gets cleaned up. Maybe that's okay, right? But most of the time, you want a weak reference because you want your objects to send and receive messages, but only if they're alive. And if the only thing holding on to it is the messenger, you probably want it to just go away, right? And so that's the weak reference messenger. It'll keep track of them, but because it's a weak reference, not a strong reference, it doesn't count for garbage collection. And therefore it's like, well, if all I have is weak references to this object, that means it's really unused, so it can go away, right? So that's the idea here. And then this messenger property is something that we are going to leverage, because you'll note it has this things with like broadcast. It overrides the set properties to be able to push all of that stuff out, and bippity boppity booyah. Let's see. Quick off-topic question. What is it you use to record your stream? Like when you were debugging the flipper? Great question. Let's see. Screen to GIF is the magical, this thing here. And if you would like to install it yourself, winget search screen to GIF. Ba-ba-bum. I actually had to do this on a clean machine. This guy right here. So the magical command you are looking for is winget install that guy. So that is the one that I like to use. WPF application. And it's a very nice one as well. So it has a nice little editor, and it's got the webcam thing. I tend to favor the recorder and occasionally the editor, but this type, because you just drag this thing around, hit record, do the needful, hit stop, and then you get dropped into the editor where you can muck with stuff. If you really want to do editing and whatnot, it works there. You can do it all here. I tend to use the Zoom It application for most of my editing for like drawing stuff, but occasionally I've used this for like redaction and whatnot, so it works. Because you can also do fun things like, say, I don't want these slides, right? I'm going to get rid of these frames, or I want to make this thing take longer than 67 milliseconds, and you can change the timing and all that stuff. So it's, yeah, got some tutorials to write for some apps today. Yes, I had to write a bug report today, and the first thing I did was popped it open, record. I was like, I could type out a long explanation of what I did, or I could just show you. So picture's worth 1,000 words, and if the picture is moving, probably worth like 10,000. Okay, anyway. Broadcast. So we're going to do this observable recipient here simply because its default constructor is going to do this weak reference messenger. If you were using DI, you would probably modify it to invoke this overload and pass in an iMessenger that was registered in your DI container. And oftentimes you will just register the static as the singleton into your DI container, or you'll create your own instance and register it either way. So if you have DI, use the other constructor. In our case, we're just going to let our default constructor fall into the base and use that. And then the key thing for the pub sub model in Community Toolkit is the messages are keyed on type by default. Right, so the easiest thing to do here, public class login event, right? String username, boom. And I honestly like record classes for them because they're quick, easy, and I don't have to think too hard. And then what we would do here is we would go messenger send new login event. And you'll note here, I gave myself a property of username, right? Because these are just objects, you can pass along whatever you'd like, right? What are you squawking about? Messenger send. What? Messenger has a send method that doesn't take a token. What are you talking about, Willis? What are you talking about, Willis? Let's see. Using community toolkit, MVVM, dot messaging. That thing. Boom. Okay. So you'll note here, if you run into that same problem that I did, iMessenger by itself doesn't is a I don't want to say a simplistic namespace, but it has very few things on it, right? And its send method wants to have messenger token and all of that stuff. The idea with a token is sometimes you need to you need to split the message based upon more than just type, right? So sometimes you want to have identify individual. They use the word channel here, which I think is good, but split that up into some other subscribers. You don't want everyone to see it, only certain ones. So, but there are extension methods like this one that will go through, and you'll note it's using this internal unit class as its token to just say, you know what, we need a token type, and if you don't specify one, we're just going to use our default, and away we go. Great. So that guy goes there. And then if we go to our status view model, we will do observable recipient here. And then what we're going to do is we are going to add an recipient of what I call it, login event. Great. Then we'll implement the interface. Boom. And then we will come here and we'll go something like status equals, and then we'll go ahead and leverage our message username logged in. Right? Very, very simplistic, very easy to go. And then we will go here, and I don't think, I want to double check here. I don't think this guy, yeah, our constructor doesn't do the magic for us. So we need to do messenger register all and pass in this. So the register all method says, hey, look at my given type and register up all of the messages that I am implementing the interface for. Now it looks like we're invoking register all, right? And we aren't. This is one of these fancy things here where, once again, source generators to the rescue. So if we go back in here, menu toolkit, MVVM. Nope, not packages, analyzers. Don't be a moron like I am. Source generators, and then where is the messenger one? iMessenger register all generator. So we can expand this guy out. We can take a look at what he did here. So inside of this lovely thing that it has gone through and done is it has built out these additional methods for create all messages registrar. The big thing here is it is actively trying to avoid allocations. It really, like, it is designed to go fast and lean, and it does an amazing job at it. But let's fire this up and actually see it work, because it's one thing to talk about it. Let's actually show it. Okay, so we come in here. We'll say Kevin, password, my password. I realize I'm saying what I'm typing, but it's all stars. No one can see it. We hit login. We wait 1, 2, 3. Boom, Kevin logged in. Oh, I love it when a demo comes together. Huzzah! And so now we've got some amount of communication flowing between areas of our app, and we can now go through and build this out. So people have worked with various queue type technologies, service bus, RabbitMQ, etc. This kind of architecture, think of it as similar to that, but on a much more tiny scale, like in process, in memory, not like splitting your system all over the place. But at least in terms of what you get with the MVVM toolkit, I think those are the big three to be aware of: is the observable properties and all of the goodness that comes around those, the implementation of iCommand and the source generators for those, and then the pub submodel for being able to communicate across all of these. And so having this sort of structure, I think, gets people well on their way of being able to build stuff out. Avalonia, I will say, has seriously impressed me as a front end desktop framework. It is insanely fast. The cross platform is interesting. I do want to drop it onto one of my systems where I actually have the Android workload installed and just see how that works. I do not have it set up here right now, so unfortunately I can't demo that one. And I'm not an Apple guy. I don't even own an Apple device. So yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and go with generally you always have to have. Well, I have no iOS device to deploy to. Time to upgrade my 3 apps kit. Izzy, I am happy I can teach something new every time. And again, if people don't like the community toolkit and you want to go with reactive UI, that's fine. If people want to go with Prism, that's fine. I think everybody who builds out some sort of MVVM library, you probably shouldn't build your own framework. That's a bad idea. There's a lot more to it than how simple the interfaces would imply. Pick one of the big ones, and you're probably okay, right? Like, and learn it well, and try to lean into it, because all of the MVVM frameworks have opinions on how you should do things. If you have opinions on how you should do things, find the framework that most closely aligns and do it that way, because it's best to not fight with the framework, right? You get the benefits by leaning into the opinions of how they've structured them. Like I said, my preference is the MVVM toolkit. I like the way it does this. I like the source generator magic. It makes me happy. I like the low allocations. I like how fast it is. I really like Avalonia for how it works. There's a few kind of rougher edges, but I mean, compared to doing this same type of demo in like Maui type applications, it runs a lot faster. Like this is seriously screaming fast. I've been building a Maui application, and now once I see how it works on Android, I'm seriously tempted to switch over and see how it goes, because it might be fun. Maybe we'll do a comparable stream with Maui at some point. If only there was a Copilot GitHub bot. Pull request. Here's something you got wrong. There are some AI ones out there that are trying to do it, and I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I question how well the AI picks up on correct opinion, because it can certainly do it. I was helping a colleague earlier today, and it's really annoying because he had Copilot installed. And unfortunately, I usually describe Copilot as that obnoxious kid in the back of the room that always knows the right answer. And that was Copilot. Every step of the way, I would start to, go to show something, and Copilot just auto fills it all in. It's like, is that right? Yes, stupid Copilot. It's like, let me tell the punchline of the joke. Stop spoiling it for me. You're taking it away. Push an empty repo and see if it can write an app based on a README file. So I will say we got real close to doing almost exactly that at Microsoft Ignite. I was with a couple Microsoft PMs empty repository and using Copilot Chat and Python, which I'm not a Python guy. I can read most languages well enough. Like that's not that big of an issue, but I don't know what to write. None of them were Python people, and we built Pong in about 10 minutes, and it was glorious. I think it took us longer to get the packages and whatnot installed than it did to write the code, and it was shockingly good and easy, which yeah, I will say that, because that is the thing. If you're playing with Copilot and you have Copilot Chat, the chat does not work well, specifically in Visual Studio. Where is it? There's an extra chat window that can pull up on the side, and I've probably turned it off. It does not work well on the left side, where it lacks context, where the only context it has is like your whole app. And it might know like what tab you have open or something. I have found that it is much better to use the inline chat and legitimately select the text that you want to ask about, whether it's, hey, implement this or write that, and it does significantly better. For example, let's try this. Create a command to log out and post a message. Let's just see. I mean, it's got enough context. Let's see. Post a message. Canceled. Let's try this again. Let's try here. Create a logout command similar to this login command and send a message with iMessenger when the user logs out. Insert an artificial delay of 2 seconds. Go. Come on, Copilot, I'm giving you a chance. Okay, so it remembered the console write lines. Excellent. Accept. So it did pretty good, except for, I think, based upon my selection, it got the attribute messed up. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Like, it's not bad, and it gets really good with testing as well, because unit testing tends to start to follow a lot of similar patterns, and it just eats that for breakfast. Absolutely eats it for breakfast. Especially once it's like, oh, I saw how you set up your last tests. Let me help you. And it just barfs them all out. It's like, dang nab you. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Now go away. Because now I have to read all this code and make sure it's right. So once again, learn how to read code, especially with AI. We're spending even more time reading code than we were previously. Sweet. Cool. Well, I hope people found that helpful. If you are new to MVVM, hopefully that gave you a bit of a primer. If you're new to Avalonia, great. If there are things on Avalonia that people would like to see me dive into more, again, I'm a little new to it, but I may start porting one or two of my apps over to it just because. It seems like it's a nice one. Yeah, no problem, Justin Bieber. Next week, we may end up doing a stream on the AutoMocker library. I've had a couple requests, one to cover it from a learning standpoint, because frankly, the lack of documentation that we've written for the library is atrocious and horrible, and we really should write better documentation. But I've also been using it with a couple new teams, and they've wanted to learn more about it, and I realized, you know what? I don't have a good kind of let's talk through when, where, and how to use it. So I've kind of done some various unit testing talks about it, and I've included it there. And I don't know if I've ever actually done a good, like, let's focus on how it works type stream. So I'm going to try to sneak in a couple PRs on it before next stream if I can. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think that's probably where we're going to head that next. And then keep an eye out for some extra videos dropping on my YouTube channel. There was the one for Get Kraken CLI, which, hang on, I got to show that off. I was so happy about this. So happy. Turns out they kind of like me. That's the help page. No, not the help page. I want this guy. Yeah. If anybody's interested. But here's the best part. You scroll down. It's me. So, yeah, they liked the video well enough. They just literally slapped it on their website, and just embedded it right on in there. So, which is cool. Now, I was talking with them when they did this, so it wasn't like a shock or anything, but it was still rather nice that they thought it was good enough that they're like, you know what, this is the type of thing that we need. So we're probably going to take a look at, if people pay close attention in that stream, there is a couple of commands on the CLI, specifically the patch command that I did not talk about. And I think we're going to dive a little deeper into that and play with that on another video. Probably not a live stream, probably something I record ahead of time, because I wanted to do a little bit of editing on stuff. It makes it easier. I don't have to worry about, doing things. I can blur stuff and whatnot if I need to. So, but expect those videos. There's going to be a video dropping on my YouTube channel as well, with a question that came up on a comment on the data grid, and I felt like it warranted a longer response. So I am close to being done editing that, and then that one will drop. I don't know if I get real motivated tonight, tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. I've got too much on my plate. So, but with that, as always, happy coding. See everyone next time.